Hi there, and welcome to another interview. Today, I've got the fabulous Kevin Smith with me, and I'm going to ask him the question I ask absolutely every guest. Hey, Kevin, why did you become carnivore?
I became carnivore because I was diagnosed with MS back in 2011, and I went on a vegan diet, for my health, right? And things just got worse and worse and worse over the following 8.5 years. And then my brother, who's been like really into the low carb, uh, paleo diet, primitive diet, and then he got into carnivore a few years before I had gotten into it while I was still vegan. And he had, told me, hey, Kevin, MS is an inflammatory disease, and this is like the ultimate anti-inflammatory diet. So, you've been getting worse and worse for all these years. So like, why not just give it a chance? So I went and gave it a chance and haven't looked back. That was in May of 2021.
So, when you say you haven't looked back, I mean, how bad was it, and what's happening now? What's the difference in you?
So at my worst, because MS is relapsing remitting, so I would have sometimes was kind of better for a couple of months, and then I would have several months that it was worse and worse. And then when I got better, it was never really better compared to the previous time that I, had a remission. And so I had gotten to the point where I was wheelchair bound and, having to go to the like Walmart or the big box stores and take the electric scooter because, I wasn't able to walk even with the canes or my little wheelie walker.
And how are you now? What's the difference?
The difference is one, physically being able to walk, being able to go without my cane. If I'm going in public, I will still carry the cane just as kind of a security blanket, because if I get like neurologically overloaded with like loud noises or screaming kids or whatever, then my brain says, oh, hey, I'm not safe. And it tries to shut me down. So then I need to have my cane to fall back on. But, the majority of each day I go out without the cane and I'm doing just fine.
And you were telling me just before we started recording about a recent trip to the hospital to look at some scans.
Yeah, so that was in February. I got my most recent MRI scan. And so when I went and talked with my neurologist after that point, and we went to go review the images from the MRI, he walks in and he's got his little folder with all the paperwork for my case. And he just walks in and plops it down on the table there and said, this isn't supposed to happen. And I was like, yeah. He's like, you're on a disease modifying drug, Tysabri. And when people are on Tysabri, you kind of just get level and you coast for the rest of your life, but you don't experience healing of your lesions and a reduction of new active lesions. And so, and I had mentioned to him, from when he first started seeing me, that I'm on a high-fat carnivore diet, and he just kind of like, okay, yeah. And he's reading his stuff and just totally nonplussed about the whole situation. But yeah, the lesions on my brain and spinal cord are no longer any active lesions, and so none that are actually inflamed or growing, and the lesions are starting to shrink, and several of them are starting to disappear.
So essentially, you're putting it in remission and regressing the condition.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
If the healthcare provider or the healthcare professional has seen that, did he show any interest in how miraculous this has been?
Not really. It was mostly just that, because I tell him I'm on the high-fat carnivore diet, and he's like, okay, whatever works for you, keep doing that. But he hasn't asked me for, hey, tell me more about this or any of that. So it's like, and that's, most medical professionals and even just people in general, that is the most common response of like, okay. And they just nod and act like, yep, so he's crazy, but I don't want to be rude, so I'm just going to say, all right, cool.
But with an MRI, it's just, there's some objective truth there. That's an image which is irrefutable. But anyway, I'm not going to get too bogged down in frustration. And for people that want to see Kevin's full story, I did interview him a couple of years ago, and we're going to move on, obviously. But a couple of years ago, we just talked about MS, but we're going to talk about what's happened since that interview. And one thing I'm really interested in is, well, firstly, Kevin, you're coaching, aren't you? That's one of the things you're definitely doing. And you've also qualified in hypnotherapy.
Yes, sir, since 2016.
So tell me a bit about your work there as a hypnotherapist.
Was in my junior year of university. I was doing a double major for mathematics and electrical engineering. But I was really just an avid juggler. So I said, hey, I can just work 2 days a week and have the rest of the 5 days off, and I can get paid to teach what I love doing and am doing anyways during any given day. For a business plan, just working 2 days a week, which sounded nice, wasn't really that tenable. So I had gotten especially after I got the MS diagnosis in 2011, then I needed something else to fill the gap for me budget-wise. And then I was treating people in the Renaissance Festival community with, things like emotional regulation, anger management, addictive personality behaviors. Although, because I'm a hypnotherapist and I'm not a licensed medical person. So then if it was anybody that really had any kind of psychological, real issue, like not just PTSD, but like split personality disorders, then I had to refer them out to the appropriate professionals. And people that are working at the Ren Fair, they're kind of like me. They ran away and joined the circus. And so they weren't able to really support, to pay me what I'm worth as a hypnotherapist. But I did it because I wanted to support my community, and several of them were friends. And so I just wanted to go and contribute to my community, as it were.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, some of the things you mentioned there, like anxiety or the mood and that sort of thing, do you ever see that the hypnotherapy side of things merges with the carnivore coaching? Do you think that you ever talk about nutrition? Does that come into it?
Well, because now the only hypnotherapy that I'm doing is with people that have signed on as a carnivore coach. And, in my bio, I mentioned that I am a certified hypnotherapist, and specifically focusing on autoimmune disorders and things like MS and Lyme disease and all of that. And so then people will be like, oh, hey, I want to go and rechange the way that I relate to food and help to desensitize to these triggers, which I've always gone and fallen back on of, hey, I'm stressed, I'm dealing with whatever craziness in life. Now's the time to reach for a moon pie or a Little Debbie snack or something. And so I worked with the hypnotherapy to go and reframe their relationship to food.
And how successful is it?
It is quite successful.
Do you ever see any big changes beyond what you were expecting?
Well, I've gotten to the point where I expect a lot from the hypnotherapy aspect. So, even when we're not doing a hypnotherapy session, I will integrate lots of the hypnotic language and and just all the script there. And so I've been able to get lots of good effect, and I've seen that for several years now. And so it's getting to the point where it doesn't really surprise me, other than just like a pleasant surprise, like, yeah, you got it.
That's great. I mean, do you touch on things like cravings, for instance?
Oh, yes.
And how does that pan out? Does it take a long time? Is it like 6 months, a year, or do you find people seem to improve quite quickly?
Well, it's quite variable. It depends on the client, where they're at in their life and what they are dealing with. And so like one of my most recent coaching clients, was just shutting down her legal practice after so many years of going and just running balls to the wall of doing the legal system. And so she's been in that for a long time. And, nerves that fire together, wire together, right? So when she's had this habit that she has gone and reinforced for, almost 30 years, then it takes a while to go and take a different path. And so for some people like that, it's taken, 6 months, a year, and she's been my client for about a year and a half. And I have seen lots of benefits and improvement in her case. But then some people like first session and they're remarkably better. And then everywhere in between on that spectrum.
So most of the clients that you see, are they sort of experienced carnivores already? They've done like a year of carnivore?
So a lot of them are actually new to carnivore because, they're dealing with multiple sclerosis, Lyme disease, other autoimmune conditions. And they see my, my profile of like, hey, I'm a carnivore coach and I deal with these situations. So let me know if you would like to get, hire me on as a coach. And so the majority of my new clients are people that are just now starting carnivore because, they've seen my other interviews and follow-ups of how I'm doing with the carnivore diet, but having MS since 2011, then it's a lot of like, how do I, maintain carnivore whenever I'm going to a party and there's cookies or snacks or whatever. And then that's just the nitty gritty of just how to maintain a carnivore diet. And the most common answer that I have for them is to front load fat. So go make sure that you are not hungry when you go to a party. Make sure that you are comfortably full, even slightly stuffed, not painfully so. Just be aware of that. And by going and front loading the carnivore food, and particularly the fat, which is most satiating, then it mitigates a lot of that issue with, you need to fall back because you're at a party and it's the social thing to do and all that.
Yeah, it's the complete reverse of what people used to do in the old days. I'm old enough to say that, by the way, where they would not eat all day because they were going out for a posh meal and they wanted to be really hungry. And because
right.
they want the most from this posh meal at the restaurant. And I think it's really interesting because that's a really common piece of advice, I think, amongst the carnivore community. In a social situation, make sure that you've eaten enough. And it seems so simple. It does stop you getting tempted. But what I was just interested in the mix of the hypnotherapy and a new carnivore. So you've got so many different routes to look at and so many different things. Like just somebody without all those issues going to carnivore is difficult for some people, isn't it? Just transitioning. But you've also got the autoimmune, you've also got the MS and Lyme and those sort of things to contend with as well. So I just think it's brilliant, Kevin, what you're doing. I met you before you qualified as a kind of a coach. Well, we were both new to it, and I think it's brilliant how you branched out. So I'm so glad to have you back on. I do have like hundreds of questions, and if it's giving away trade secrets, you can say no, I can't really explain this. But do you actually hypnotize people online when you're coaching them, or does that have to be done one-to-one? How does it work?
So it works well in one-to-one, but it also works well online, just because hypnosis, hypnotherapy is all mediated by language. And so what I like to set as an analogy, it's like doing a partner dance with your brain. It's a mental partner dance where I, as the hypnotherapist, am leading, and then the client is following. And so if I lead into a certain direction, I'm having to, track with them and view how they are responding to it. But then if they are able to go on that mental journey with me, then we'll go and we'll do the whole process. But if it's anything that's too hard or that they, disagree with, any kind of, mental or emotional or moral kind of situation, then they're obviously going to just be like a dancer. If you try and go into this large pirouette and and your partner is not really well balanced and they're not able to do the movement, well, they're going to stop the dance just right then. So,
And you can see that happening, can you? Or do they just tell you? How does that work?
it's mostly visible just because, I've been doing the hypnosis with people for long enough that, you can identify characteristic ways that they respond to questions or suggestions. And, like if you're doing a progressive relaxation and you have what's called a proof of like a challenge. So you get them where they're like really calm and really peaceful, and you're increasing the sense of relaxation and loose, limp, and lazy of the muscles of your face, and particularly the eyes, because they are the smallest muscles of your eyelids. They're the smallest ones that we have volitional control over. So if you go and breathe that sense of relaxation, and you're counting them down, doing the progressive relaxation, then you can say, now because you've gone and taken away all of the energy and you're so relaxed and so calm and so loose, limp, and lazy there in your face, and particularly the eyes, then you will notice that because you're all relaxed and all the energy is moved out and you're just so slack now, that you can try and open your eyes. But in order to open your eyes, you would have to bring tension back into the muscles of your face. And you've done really well of getting fully relaxed. And so then lead them to do a challenge of like, without bringing tension back into your eyes, go ahead and try and open your eyes. And you can see them doing this, but they realize that it's a kind of a catch-22 because they have to introduce tension back into the face in order to open the eyes, which they're physiologically fully capable of doing, but mentally they have gone and followed the dance, as it were. And then there's the contraindication of being able to open the eyes and not bringing tension to your body. And so then they go and they try for a little bit, and I say, all right, now stop trying and go and take that deeper and let that relaxation flow over, down, around, and through the body, from the tip of the head to the tops of the toes, whatever, just to kind of throw them off.
I'm imagining that most people are amenable and book you because of what you do, but do you still find that there are people that are reluctant once they're in that situation or unable to get that relaxed, that you can't really get them into that state?
Most people are really self-selecting, so that if they're not going to be, an ideal candidate for that, then I'll go with just a general superficial layer of giving the suggestion work and going and doing the reframing without them getting into a deep state of hypnosis. And that still has a benefit, even if they're not bark like a chicken, quack like a dog, all that.
Yeah, and I noticed you snuck in that technical word about reframing, and to a lay person like me, I guess that conjures up images of you saying, well, when you see a chocolate cake, think of a spider or something like that. Is that, I mean, I know that's a little bit crass, but is that the type of thing you're doing, or is it more about the thought processes behind when you're stressed, you want to grab something that's bad for you?
Well, I mean, it's a little crass, but it's really on the right direction. So the reframing is like with me with it, and that's if I had, because back in November, December, of course it's the holiday season and people have cakes and sugary drinks and alcohol and all that. And in the past, I have gone and said, oh, well, it's just a little thing that, how bad can it be? I'm feeling so well now. I feel like I've cured a mess. So obviously I'm invincible, right? And so then I go and I take a small piece of cake, and the carbohydrates, the refined flours, the sugar, and particularly with the alcohol, when I'd have a beer or something, then for the next week or two, I'm just all laid up and I'm a wreck. So I go and I associate, this is probably tasty, but it's not for me, because I really like being able to walk and hold my bladder. So
yeah, getting into that positivity, I suppose. I mean, I on a very basic level, a lot of people seem to be helped when I say to them, don't think in a negative way. Don't think today, I'm not going to eat this. I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to do this. But to think, yeah, today I'm going to eat a lot of protein. I'm going to eat fats. I'm going to do this. And just simply switching off that subconscious block of being negative, which if you put a negative thought into your mind, you have to think about that thing to not think about it. So I think, to me,
don't think about pink elephant, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is exactly the example I use. So I mean, the thing is, Kevin, it's great, and I'm just trying to, in this interview, open it up to people who maybe haven't even thought about this as a possibility, and they might think, oh, that doesn't sound my cup of tea. I'm scared. I don't want to be hypnotized and be in a trance and not able to operate, so I'm just trying to demystify it, really. So for the people that are looking and thinking, I'm really struggling with cravings, is hypnotherapy for me? I mean, those sort of images of being in a trance and not being in control, is that something that's outdated, not really true anyway?
Well, I mean, it is an outdated framing of the issue, of the situation, because if you don't have a client who is like fully on board and fully bought in to go, all in on the whole situation, on the whole process, then they're not going to get the effects of the process. And so, but everybody is sovereign, and that's one of the things that I'm always going and reaffirming to my clients is, even in this state, you are from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, left, right, inside, any other form of dimensionality that you identify with, you are sovereign. And I can't make you do anything. I don't have the magic words. I don't have the magic voice. I can't reach through the screen and shake you and say, do this, so I go and reaffirm their self-efficacy.
Yes, and the reason I'm doing this is I'm just playing devil's advocate. I mean, I understand how this process works. I did physiology and health sciences at degree level, so I didn't want you to think, wow, he really doesn't get it. But I totally get it. And I really was very interested in hypnosis as in general, just not really in your realm. I quite like watching the hypnosis sort of shows for entertainment. I think that's quite interesting. I went to a few that were live and mingled with people that were hypnotized, and I think that's entertaining, but also is troublesome when you're trying to actually get into the therapy side of things. So yeah, I'm glad that's cleared up, and I think you're doing great work. And I want to move on to another thing that I didn't know you were involved in, and you're looking at breath work now as well, which is a real hot topic, isn't it? The breathing techniques. So could you just speak a little bit about that for us?
The breath work is one of those things that if you're not breathing, you die, right? So obviously you know how to breathe, taking breath in, letting the breath out. I mean, it's just kind of a no-brainer. The vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system, it runs through all the organs of your body. And in particular, it goes and it runs through the chest plexus and then down at the diaphragm area. And so by going and doing different forms of breathing, either breathing slow, deep, and low, like deep into the belly, and going through that, and then going with the nose, that all goes and activates the parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, relax, and recuperate, right? And then if, think about if you're going and stepping into the road and a car just goes by, well, I mean, your involuntary action is to, gasp and breathe into your chest. And that activates your sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And so by going and modifying the type of breathing that you're doing and the length that you're breathing, and whether you're breathing into the nose or the mouth, into the chest or into the diaphragm, you can modulate what your nervous system is doing.
And is this something that you incorporate into your coaching, or is it a just completely different field?
So I go and I talk with my clients with the coaching, but it's something that's kind of running, parallel to, and sometimes there's a little bit of crossover, but then other times it's just parallel and not intersecting. So it's, people that don't want to go carnivore, well, they still react well to the breathwork coaching.
Yeah, and that's where I was getting to, actually, because I know at the beginning you were saying basically you are talking to people that are carnivores, but for me it seems like the hypnotherapy and the breathing could benefit anybody, to be honest, in any way they're eating. And I do want to get that out there. I also know that in the back of your mind, as will be in the back of my mind, you want to talk about nutrition because it does play a big role as well. So how did you get into the aspects of breathing?
So I had, played around with what's called the Wim Hof method for probably 7 or 8 years past now. And I derived lots of benefit from that. I would practice the breathing method. I would practice the cold exposure, starting with the cold showers and going out in my skivvies whenever it was wintertime and just grounding for a while. So I would get some benefit from that, but I would go and it would be rather temporaneous, so that it would be like, okay, I feel better, for the 5 to 10 minutes after that, but I wasn't able to just maintain that over a length of time. And so I followed a company called Breathmasters, and they do the transformational breathwork coaching. And so I went and I, signed up for their coaching program, their coaching training. And part of the training program is you get to do lots of the long extended journeys where you're doing what's called holotropic breathing. It's similar to the Wim Hof method, but instead of just like 30 breaths and then hold your breath out, that's a punctuated, shortened version of the holotropic method, which is where you're going into the belly, into the chest, and let go. And then you continue that for 45 minutes to 90 minutes, and you get what's called transient hyperfrontality, because when you dump the carbon dioxide out of your lungs and therefore out of your blood, well, the carbon dioxide is not a waste gas. It's like very therapeutic, and without carbon dioxide, the oxygen that's carried in the hemoglobin of our blood, it can't actually separate and go to the tissues of your body. So when you're doing like hyperventilation, or what we call superventilation, where it's controlled, and you're dumping out all the carbon dioxide, then all 70,000 miles of the vasculature in your system goes and constricts slightly, not dangerously so, unless you have like a history of heart attack and stroke and all these other things. So we go and we vet their clients before we go and do a session. But so we do that whole dumping out the oxygen, or the carbon dioxide. You got plenty of oxygen, but the oxygen can't really go to your tissues. So you'll start to feel lightheaded and a little tingly in your extremities. And because it is a vasoconstriction, it will actually go and slow the blood flow to your frontal lobe, which is where your ego mind is, the monkey mind, as we call it. And just, being able to go and abstractly strategize and plan and schedule and all that. So once you get into that breathing pattern for, 15, 20 minutes, then your frontal lobe shuts down enough, or quiets down enough, where you can actually maintain just a somatic experience and a somatic exercise.
In a layman's term, it stops your mind racing, I'm imagining.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm absolutely fascinated. Oh, sorry, go on.
I said, well, and with that, when people are, starting to calm down in their, awareness, their ego mind, then you start dropping in the hypnotic script work and do like the 432 tones and the binaural tones and all of these other elements of the hypnosis and hypnotherapy, and then integrate that into the breathing process and that whole somatic experience.
And is this something that the breathing somebody could do? Say, for instance, they weren't interested in the hypnotherapy, but they still get benefit from just going through the breathing coaching?
Absolutely. And, so because I've been doing the hypnotherapy, hypnotherapy is therapeutic for the client, but even when you are the hypnotist, then, and you're going and giving these hypnotic suggestions and sense of well-being and sense of self-efficacy to your client, well, you're going to still, that's going to wash back on yourself. And so it's therapeutic for the hypnotist as well as the hypnotee.
Yeah. So if you're relaxing the brain and you're working on the vagus nerve, I'm assuming also there's going to be some huge benefits for digestion.
Yes, particularly going and doing the deep belly breathing, because you're going and you're massaging your diaphragm and all your internal organs, essentially. So it's going and just giving a gentle pulsing massage, like a slow motion massage to the body, and it helps everything with the organs.
Yeah, and I'm going to pick up on something you said, because you said carbon dioxide is not a waste product, but I always thought that breathing, you were getting rid of carbon dioxide as a waste. So could you just expand on that a little bit? I know what you said about the interaction with the hemoglobin, but is it, so it's not a waste product, carbon dioxide?
It's not a waste product. It's actually necessary to life. So like, what percentage of carbon dioxide is our atmosphere?
I think it's 0.04, isn't it, or something?
0.04. If it drops below 0.02, animal life starts to die, because we have to have carbon dioxide. And that thing that I was telling you about earlier, it's called the Bohr effect, the BOHR. And you have to have a certain level of carbon dioxide in your blood in order for the oxygen in your blood to be able to go to your body's tissues and do its thing.
And is there an upper level where there's too much carbon dioxide? I don't want to open a can of worms here.
So have you heard of like high altitude training, where people go and they exercise up in the mountain, and then they come down to the ground level, and then they're just like supercharged because they've attenuated to lower oxygen and higher carbon dioxide? So that's a very therapeutic thing. And that's what the breathwork coaching is. You're actually developing carbon dioxide tolerance. So your hypothalamus is not going to be so reactive to, oh, I've got to breathe because all this carbon dioxide. People think, oh, I have the urge to breathe because I need more oxygen. But that's not the mechanism that instigates the instinct to go and pull in a breath. It is, because normally we are breathing rather shallow, and we're breathing rather uncontrolled. And so we have dysfunctional breathing, and we're emptying the carbon dioxide out of our blood too much. So then when we hold our breath, empty lung or full lung, either way, the carbon dioxide just from cellular respiration will start to build up in our blood. And then the hypothalamus and, other parts of the midbrain go and say, oh, I got to breathe because, we have low CO2 tolerance. And so it's carbon dioxide that goes and makes us need to breathe, as opposed to the oxygen.
Yeah, the high altitude training is remarkable. And I think that's one of the things, as a personal trainer, I trained one Olympiad, actually. She was a javelin thrower. And it's interesting that that effect is real. They go and do the high altitude training and adapt, come back, and they feel like super people. It's very interesting, actually. So that's great. I mean, I tend to do short, sharp interviews, and I'd like to go in more depth, but I think I just want to stick to what I do with everybody else, which is about 40, 45 minutes. So if people are interested in contacting you, what's the best way to get you, Kevin?
So it would be best over Instagram. My handle is Scholarly Changeworks, all one word. So Scholarly Changeworks on Instagram, and then you can send me a DM and then say, hey, what you would like more information on, or if you want to hire me for a session of coaching, either carnivore or the breathwork or the hypnotherapy. You can contact me on Instagram and just send me a DM, and I'll be in contact.
Yeah, and don't worry, your link will be in the description, so it's really clickable, and I'll put some images up on the screen so people can see that all the time. Is there anything you really feel passionately you'd like to end the interview with?
Not being a victim of your current situation, because things that you have dealt with in the past is, have the radical self-ownership. You may not have intended it to be bad, but we are here because of the choices that we have made, and that's okay. And whatever negative symptom or situation that you've had, you don't have to perpetuate that. And just allow yourself the grace to go and change that and do better for yourself.
Wow, that was really interesting. I love that guest. Absolutely amazing. If you like stuff like that, don't forget to look at this video next. And while you're at it, look in the description, download the Carnivore Experience app.